Hey, beautiful soul family. Welcome back to Red Hot Truth, a home for the broken where healing begins. I'm Michelle and I help people heal their soul wounds through the love, power, and grace of the Lord Jesus Christ. Please don't forget to hit that like, share, comment, subscribe. All of that helps our ministry grow. And if you are listening outside of YouTube, there is an opportunity now to text the show. There should be a text button on your screen. So if you have anything that you would like to share or anything that you would like me to talk about, please let me know. Today we are talking about the grief of having a dysfunctional parent. This is something that I have gone through, and the grief has literally crippled me at times. Grief is a spirit. There is a spirit of grief that wraps around your body. It can chain you up. It can cause infirmity. It can cause major stress within your system. You do need deliverance from the spirit of grief, but you also have to heal the actual soul wounds, heal the emotion as well, because it's both. That grief is kind of not only the grief of what you lost, but also everything that you didn't have. If you're looking at your peers and you see how connected they are, or even your siblings, narcissistic parents often have a favorite child, and you see how they connect with that favorite child, or you see how they have this amazing relationship with your cousin, but they don't have that relationship with you. That can be really painful when you're feeling this constant void and feeling like you're not good enough. It can lead to a lot of feelings of unworthiness and shame, and also fear. That lack of security, that fear of feeling alone. When you feel so alone in such a broken world and you don't have that support system, that can be very, very crippling emotionally and mentally. That is one of the things that really contributed to my anxiety over the years and my chronic overthinking. It was the fact that I really didn't feel safe. I didn't have anyone to turn to when life got hard. There was a shame around asking for help. I didn't want to ask for help because I felt like such a burden most of my life. So it's really hard then to ask for support, ask for care, ask for help when it's been withheld from you. It just feels shameful to reach out for support. So that's why we develop this hyper independence. We become so dependent on ourselves. We may obsess about our career. We may work really, really hard, become workaholics. And that can be a real problem if you have lots of poverty consciousness and lack. That can lead to you living in absolute survival mode, where you're not actually getting ahead. You're not earning a good enough income. You're barely just getting by. And no matter what you do, nothing seems to prosper in your life. Sometimes this is because of that fear that you're trapped in, and you're coming from that place of survival. When you're living in survival mode, then everything in your life flows from that energy source. This isn't New Age theology. Some of that drove me crazy when I was in the New Age, and I thought that I had to do more in order to achieve, and I had to change everything about me. It became very toxic and very negative. So I don't want people to start operating under the law of attraction and The Secret and all of that, because that can be really toxic, really negative. But the reality is, if you have these core beliefs, like I'm not worthy, I have to work really hard. In order for me to be seen, I have to jump through hoops. These core beliefs come in when you have these parental wounds, when you've never felt safe or you've always lacked. So that's why sometimes healing those core wounds, healing the internal world, can shift the external. And doing this God's way, focusing on healing the core wounds, the soul wounds. We're not going on this never-ending quest to solve every problem in our lives, because that is really exhausting. But it is about getting into your emotions and releasing that pain that you've been holding on to for a very long time, and then also doing the deliverance process to bind up those spirits that are blocking you from being able to move forward in your life. And not just in your career, but in your relationships, in your family. We don't want to repeat this trauma with our of division. The problem is when you have a toxic or dysfunctional parent, they won't take accountability. They won't apologize. They won't try to make things right. They won't look you in the eye and say, I do love you. They will try to blame you for how you're feeling. And that's my experience with my toxic narcissistic parents. When I would try to fill that void, when I would try to connect with them, when I would try to heal or repair the connection, they were so afraid of accountability that they would take a giant step back and the void would get bigger. and bigger and bigger. And as parents, we have to be willing to do the hard things. We have to be willing to sit and listen to our children vent at us and tell us that they hate us, because they do. That's part of having a preteen or a teenager. They can be an absolute nightmare. And we have to be able to cope with that, because that's all part of being a parent. They go through these phases. The problem is when you have a toxic parent, they can't cope with your emotions. They can't go with the flow. They don't have the emotional maturity to meet your needs or meet you where you're at, or to understand that this is something that may be able to be repaired, because they're so afraid of the accountability. They're so afraid to admit that they may have done something wrong. And there's no repair there, because now we're defensive. Now we're wearing our armor, and we're not going to allow that parent to get closer to us when they're constantly pushing back against any sort of accountability. So it just doesn't work. And I think that's a big issue with previous generations, our parents, their parents. They are wearing a lot of armor in a lot of cases. And I know some of it is because of their trauma and the things that they've gone through in their lives. Our ancestors went through lots of war times. So in some ways, we've had it easy compared to what they went through. And some of this is generational, but a lot of it is. But there's no healing. Like, we are a generation that is trying to bring healing and trying to change those patterns and bring more love to our children, and to develop those strong connections, because we know what it's like to feel lost in the dark and to feel alone and to walk through life feeling like you have nobody, living from that place of survival mode, which is just so overwhelming and so stressful. Many of us have lived in poverty or walked through poverty consciousness for years and years whilst trying to raise our children, because of those feelings of insecurity. When you have that insecure attachment and you never felt safe, that has a snowball effect, and it causes us to live in lack and live in fear. The Lord really needs to heal that fear in us and change the way that we think, change the way that we feel, and change how we connect with our children so that we're not repeating these patterns and these toxic cycles. This type of grief truly does change who we are. And it leaves such a void in us. This void is really a space in your soul that aches for safety, aches for love, aches for validation. And you find yourself constantly seeking approval, constantly questioning your worth, and constantly trying to prove that you're enough, which is why we can sometimes become workaholics. We can develop OCD. We can constantly try to fix everything in our lives and fix the people around us. For me, my healing journey became such an obsessive thing, especially when I was in the new age where I thought that I had to fix it all. And coming home to Jesus, I realized that He is the one that is going to heal me. And He is the healer, and I had to surrender and give it to Him. And that was something that I really struggled to do. I struggled to give up control. Even now, I still struggle with this, where I still feel like I have to fix it all. That hyper independence is still there. I'm still sometimes going 200 miles an hour. And when the kids are sick, for example, I'm doing praying and healing and deliverance over them. Sometimes it's coming from such a place of anxiety and panic and fear. And the Lord was like, I need you to put down this control and this fear, because that spirit of fear actually acts as a block. For me, nothing in my life is moving forward. The ministry is growing at a snail's pace. I literally have one new subscriber a week or something, and it's actually so frustrating when I'm putting in so much time and energy and effort and work, and I have been for a long time. I've been very consistent. And I'm like, Lord, nothing is happening. Completely give up all control, fully surrender, put it in God's hands. Let Him be the healer. Let Him do the work. And over the last few weeks, I've really been just handing things to Him and giving it to Him, giving Him my grief, which was huge, like this massive boulder of grief that I was still carrying. Despite all the work that I've done, all the healing that I've done, I was still carrying this massive boulder. And He said, I need you to put it down. Stop trying to chip away at it every day, slowly, because you're never going to get through that level of grief. You're never going to be able to put that boulder down. It's too big. It's too heavy. So just put it in my hands or lay it at my feet and give it to me. And I did. And it was such a relief. It felt like this massive weight was lifted off of me. This void becomes the lens that you see the world through. And it can really set you up for pain in relationships. And Even in your self-worth and in your walk with God, you might not feel worthy of His love, or you may have issues around authority figures and feeling like, oh, what if God is going to hurt me the way they did? What if He's going to leave me the way they did? The betrayal, the grief, the core wounds that we lived with for so long. Sometimes we see everybody through those lenses. We see our partners or even our children, if they are a source of stress in our lives, which they can be. Children can, if they're going through something, my son, since our dog died, has struggled with that grief. But as parents, we don't get to check out. That's the problem. We grew up with parents who did check out. We grew up with parents who put their own needs first and who would push the hard things aside and instead would pick up the can of alcohol or would just go to the pub and escape reality. And we can't do that because we can't repeat those patterns and those cycles. We have to be present as parents and we have to deal with the hard things. You might feel like love always has to be earned, or like peace is something that you will never have, or like you have to stay in control just to feel safe, which is something that I've really struggled with, as I mentioned. But the truth is, you were never meant to carry the weight of your parents' sins, and you were never meant to parent your parent, and you were never meant to heal yourself all in your own strength the way I've been trying to. We are meant to put that in God's hands and let Him bind up our wounds, let Him heal us. And this kind of lifelong emotional pain doesn't just sit in your heart, it can sit in your body. Unresolved trauma and grief, bitterness, fear, it can really make us sick over time because, like I mentioned, that spirit of grief wraps all around your body. It can cause real severe physical pain. Proverbs 17:22 says, a cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. So when your spirit has been crushed by neglect, criticism, abuse, your body really feels it too. That's why Jesus invites us to lay it all down, not to ignore it, but to release it. I do believe in somatic release as well from the body, like doing things that help us release these things, like dancing, certain types of breath work. Be careful with breath work because some of it can be occult or new agey, but if you're just using it as a stress relief and as a way to release trapped emotions from your body, it can be really, really powerful. Warm baths can help your nervous system to feel safe. Walks in nature where you see God walking alongside you. All of these things can be really healing because they're helping you slow down and get into a place of rest and getting out of the mind into the body and then releasing these trapped emotions. Some people love things like ice baths. That's not really for me. Stressing out the nervous system in order to learn coping mechanisms. I don't think that works for people who have a lot of trauma and who've lived in stress for a long time. It might help some people, but for me personally, I know that wouldn't be healing for me. But maybe things like a sauna might be more healing. If you're somebody who struggles with the cold, if you have fibromyalgia, then the ice baths might actually shock your nervous system too much, or they might trigger old wounds of neglect. For me, I have a memory where I spent all night shivering in the bath. If I get wet in the rain and my clothes are all wet, literally that triggers a trauma response for me, and I have to get home and shower quickly and get dried up and warmed up. Hunger can trigger trauma for me because I often waited a long time for my dinner while my parents sat drinking in the pub. So understanding yourself and what your body needs, because a person who hasn't gone through neglect might not have those same trauma responses as me, but you could have different trauma responses. If you were shouted at every day, you could have a massive trauma response to somebody slightly raising their voice. It's important that we learn to understand ourselves and what we need and what things are more triggering for us and what things might actually be healing for us. Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. That's Matthew 11:28. That is an invitation to lay down the boulder. I was picking it up and carrying it and chipping away at it and saying, Lord, let's heal this today. Let's do that. Like, I was in control of the healing process. I think the Lord allowed me to be because I learned so much while I was doing all of that. Like, in order for me to help others understand what they're going through, I needed to mentally understand it. But at this point, I was struggling to put it down, even though I've already healed it. So he was like, you need to put it down. You don't need to carry the boulder. You don't need to bring it everywhere with you. You don't need to stay in this hypervigilance where you're trying to control the process. because that's exhausting and it's keeping you stuck in the trauma cycle. So we have to learn when to put the boulder down and let him take the grief, the anger, the unmet needs, the confusion, and trade that for peace and rest, because he wants us to rest in him. And then forgiveness and freedom. I know this is such a triggering topic. People get so stressed when we talk about forgiveness. And I've seen this on social media so many times where people get very angry, and the topic of forgiveness can really cause chaos and cause division. But forgiveness really doesn't mean that we're pretending it's okay, or that we're trusting someone who is toxic, or that we're opening the door to let them come back and do it all again. Forgiveness is releasing the poison that they planted in you. And that means that it can no longer control you. Ephesians 4:31-32 says, "Get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as Christ God forgave you." Because when we forgive, we stop drinking the poison. Instead, we let God's love cleanse us from within. And that's where true healing begins. Because that bitterness, the anger, the rage, the hatred, that acts as a blockage to healing. Because it hardens the heart and it sits in front of the heart. And that needs to be gone. If you want the Lord to heal your heart, you can't have this boulder sitting in front of your heart. It has to be put down. And then the Lord can reach your heart, he can touch your heart, and he can bind up those wounds. And forgiveness is generally a process for somebody who's gone through a lot of trauma. Because if you have all these fragmented parts of you, if you've gone through all these different memories, if you have symptoms of dissociative identity disorder, where you have multiple fragmented parts or complex PTSD, these parts of you could all need to individually forgive. Or sometimes you could work with 5 fragments at a time. You know, if they all have a similar wound, a similar core issue, sometimes the Lord will bring like 5 parts of you together all at once. And he will say, okay, let's heal them. But that does include forgiveness. And if you're holding on to that anger and you're refusing to put it down, it makes the heart unreachable to healing. The next thing is letting Jesus reparent you. So you may never have been nurtured. You may never have been held in safety, never been told I love you or I'm proud of you. But Jesus will do that. He is the perfect parent, the one who restores what was stolen in us. Psalms 27:10 says, "Though my father and my mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me." He's the one who steps into that void. He becomes that safe place. He teaches your heart what love truly is. And it's not control, it's not manipulation, it's not performance, but it's unconditional grace. Part of this as well is reparenting yourself. So you're learning to see yourself through the lens of a loving parent. You're learning to look at your inner child, not through the lens of shame, fear, unworthiness, guilt. You're learning to look at this child part of you through the lens of compassion and love and truth. And you're starting to see yourself through God's eyes. Because Satan wants you to believe that you're unworthy of love. But the Lord has always loved you before you were in your mother's womb. He needs you to see your worthiness and your uniqueness and what makes you different, and use people who are different, because he doesn't want people who are all the same. People who are different stand out from the crowd, and they were meant to stand out from the crowd. You know, we're not meant to blend in and be like everybody else. I used to say, I'm not a sheep. I don't follow the crowd. I do my own thing, and I always have. And that's part of the reason why I became the family scapegoat, because I don't just follow them blindly and do everything that they say. I had my own mind and my own heart, and I would do what was right, not just do what was needed to blend in. I don't follow the trends or the crowds. Being different is a good thing, and embracing your uniqueness, embracing what makes you you. And I think that inner child work and letting Jesus bind up those wounds is really ultimately what's going to get you there. So let's close this out with a prayer. Father God, you see their wounds, you see their broken heart. I pray that you will help them to lay down that boulder now, to put it in your hands. Let's unzip the heart. Say, Father, I forgive my parents for, just list the things that you need to forgive them for. Father, help me to release this grief from my body. Help me to trust you. Help me to feel safe again. Open my heart. Free me from this bitterness, this anger, this rage, any hatred that I'm holding on to. I give it to you. Father, I ask that you heal my parent, that you set them free, that you meet their needs, and that you love them. Lord, I give you my heart. I ask that you soften it. that you help me to be like you, that you help me move through compassion, forgiveness, and laying down the burden of guilt, grief, shame, anger, despair, fear, worry, control. I lay it all down at your feet, Lord, and I thank you for healing me. We love you, Lord. Amen. So I pray that this episode today has touched your heart and has helped you. If you would like to support this ministry, there are ways that you can do so below. I love you lots, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye. Remember to stay close to Jesus because freedom is yours.